Welcome back to my channel, guys. I'm so glad to have you back here again. And if you are new, hello and welcome. You are watching True Crime and Chill, where I come and talk about some very interesting and shocking cases out there. And if you want to keep chilling with me every week when I upload a new episode, then I highly recommend that you subscribe to the channel and also follow me on my other socials so you always know when I have a new episode ready and waiting just for you. Now, before I get into this case, I have to give out a content warning that in this case, I will be talking about some sexual abuse, assault, as well as murder. And if any of this content is triggering to you in any way, then viewer discretion is very much advised. Now, let's get into the case. This is another case that was also suggested to me by the same person who gave us last week's case, a good friend of mine, Hope. Thank you so much again, Hope, for giving me this case as well. You have no idea how awesome you're being right now, and you have no idea how much this helps out my channel. So thank you again. This week's case is a serial killer's case, and it happened in the 90s, specifically between 1996 and 1997. And we are going to talk about a man who was given the nickname of the Phoenix Strangler, because between 1996 and 1997, he was terrorizing the women of Phoenix in Durban, killing, raping, and assaulting them. The Phoenix Strangler was born in 1968, and I'm going to call him the Phoenix Strangler until I get to the point of the case where he was identified, because I want to build up that mystery with you. I want to build up that intense suspense. I want you to want to know who this guy is. So we're going to call him the Phoenix Strangler until I get to the point of the case where he was identified. So he was born in 1968, and his mother described him to be a very intelligent young man, and he was very helpful, he was very thoughtful. Even around the house, he bought groceries for the family, made sure that everything was good. So he was just an all-around good guy. So you would wonder how things turned out to be the way they are, and you will know as the case go on why he started doing the things that he did. But his mother thought of him as a very intelligent, thoughtful, and helpful young man. In 1996, the Phoenix Strangler went on a rampage. He was raping and killing women in around Phoenix, and he would do this right after luring them to the cane fields of Mount Edgecombe near Phoenix. He would target young, unsuspecting women with the promise of having found jobs for them in the hotels of the nearby towns. So he would decide that he had to walk with them. He would tell them that they had to walk to these job locations so they can get there and have everything set up for them. And when he sees that his victims actually believe the story that he's given them, he would then convince them that in order to get there quicker, they would have to go through the cane fields of Mount Edgecombe. And as this happened, being none the wiser, his victim would then fall prey to his attacks. He would pin his victim down and then strike her with a rock until she fell unconscious. And then he would tie her up and then proceed to sexually assault her. And then when he's done with that, he would strangle her until she was no longer breathing. And that's exactly how he killed every single one of his victims. Hence the name, the Phoenix Strangler. And to show just how intelligent this guy was, there's a reason he always took his victims to the cane fields of Mount Edgecombe. And it's because after doing what he did to her, to whoever his victim was, he would then burn the cane fields around the body to make sure that the body burns as well. Or if he didn't burn it, he knew that the cane field workers of that cane field would eventually burn the fields when the harvest came closer, because they wanted to get rid of any dangerous snakes or rodents or any other animal that kept on feeding on the plantations. So they would burn the cane fields, getting rid of the evidence for him unintentionally. So he was really, really smart about this. And this gave the police a really hard time in investigating the murders of this guy, because they had to find a body that hadn't been burned beyond recognition so they can analyze the body and be able to find the Phoenix Strangler. But because this was his way of killing his victims, or rather getting rid of the evidence and covering his tracks, it made it very hard for police to catch him. And also it made it very easy for him to get away with what he did for over a year, from 1996 until 1997. And another thing that made it difficult for the police to find this guy was because most of the people that lived in Phoenix or in the surrounding locations near the cane fields were people who came from villages and rural areas, trying to find a better life in the towns nearby, trying to make something of themselves or trying to get some jobs so they can feed themselves.
Most of the people living in squatter camps, they come from the rural and the farm areas, coming closer to the city for a better life. And they arrive here alone. They either just live in a shack or rent a room. And if something does happen to them, there's no identification on them. That makes it very difficult. And the immediate family and the next of kin don't even know that they are gone missing, or they're laying in hospital or laying in the mortuary.
So like I said, the Phoenix Strangler started killing in 1996, right? And the killings kept on going until in 1997, when a cane field worker came across a body. And this body was very badly decomposed. And it was the body of a young black woman who had been murdered and dumped in the cane fields. And the detective that was called over to the cane fields by the cane field worker also said that he couldn't identify who the woman was because she was badly decomposed and burned, but he could identify the fact that this was a young black woman's body. And not even long after that, as a matter of fact, just 8 weeks later from the discovery of the first body, another body of a woman had been discovered in the same area close to where the first body was found. And like the first body, this one was also tied up and burned very, very badly. So it showed that this murder was quite similar to the first one that they had discovered. And as time went on, even more bodies got to be found. One body was found in May, and then 4 more bodies were found in June. So this brought it to a total of 7 bodies that had been discovered in 1997. And when the police saw that there were quite a lot of similarities with these cases or with these crime scenes as they kept on discovering these new bodies, they saw that these women could have been murdered by the same person because they were all tied up, burned, with gags in their mouths and with ligatures around their necks to show that they were strangled. So the police came to the conclusion that they are dealing, or could be dealing, with a serial killer here. So to assist with the investigation, the police got the help of one of the most well-known criminal profilers and psychologists in South Africa, a doctor by the name of Dr. Mickey Pistorius. And Dr. Pistorius was going to help them build a profile of this guy so they can know exactly what kind of serial killer they're dealing with, so they can know how to tailor their investigation. And one of the very first things that came to the mind of Dr. Pistorius was that the police could be dealing with an organized serial killer, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And so because of this, it made him very dangerous and also gave him the mentality of a psychopath. And by studying his way of killing, she managed to develop or make a sense of the personality of the Phoenix Strangler. And another thing that she found was that this guy had a signature like any other organized serial killer, a way to make him stand out, a way to make him or to make people see that these people were killed by the same person.
The specific signature of this killer was his ligatures that he used. It was very obvious that they were similar, that they were uniquely placed around the victim's head, and ultimately the gag or wad of cloth in the victim's mouth indicated it was the same person. That was his definite signature.
Okay, so now they knew what kind of serial killer they were dealing with, so they had to focus their efforts on finding this guy. So now the hunt was on, but first they had to identify him, and this wasn't going to be easy because they had to search around the areas that were near the cane fields, and these areas were quite huge. So it was going to be like trying to find a needle in a haystack, a very big haystack. So they had to find a way to narrow it down so they can know exactly where to look for this guy. So the different locations that were found around the cane fields were places that were predominantly white, black, and Indian. So it may have seemed like it was a bit hopeless to look in all of them because they were very huge. It was a huge territory to cover. But fortunately, Dr. Pistorius came with some very useful information. And she said that a lot of serial killers are very intra-racial, which means that they prefer to kill within their own race. And since all of the women that had been discovered were black women, it gave the police the idea that they had to look in a predominantly black location. So now this had narrowed down the search, and they knew exactly where to try to find this guy, where to put all their efforts so they can finally identify and arrest him. You know, one of the most disturbing things that one of the detectives mentioned as I was researching about this case was that the thing about serial killers is they will never stop, or they would never stop killing unless they are arrested, incarcerated, or killed. Because these people are driven by either sexual fantasies or traumas that always keep on reoccurring. And even after they kill someone, their urges would make them feel like they want to kill again, and then again, and then again, and then again. So they would never stop until someone finally stops them. So they were seriously concerned that this guy was going to keep on dropping bodies unless they do something about it. So remember, at this point of the case, only 7 women were found. But as time went on, 3 more women were found in Phoenix, and they had all been killed the same way as the other 7 women. So this took the death toll of the Phoenix Strangler to a total of 10 murdered women. And even though they knew what kind of serial killer they were looking for and in what area to try to find him in, they still had to identify this guy. And they were not going to be able to do that without any concrete evidence. And how were they going to find that evidence if the crime scenes kept on being burned and ruined every time a new victim had been taken? So this really was just going to get a bit difficult for them. And for you smart cookies out there, you might be thinking, what about dental records? I mean, they could try to take the dentals of the burned bodies and they could try to see if they can match them against any dental records on the system, right? Well, guys, remember, these people that were in Phoenix, a lot of them came from places that were very poverty-stricken. So they weren't going to be able to afford a dentist or get a dental job or a dental therapy so they can have their dental records on a system. So this also was going to be a dead end because people who could only afford the dentist were people who lived in much higher class areas. So this also was going to be another dead end. So now investigators had another idea that they had to go in deeper with this case. And they decided to look into the DNA that is found in a person's bone marrow. So they wanted to look at that, and they also wanted to look at something called a dental pulp. You could look that up if you want to. I don't know what it is. But yeah, that's what they were going to do next. And hopefully it was going to give them some sort of a lead. About 2 weeks later, police actually caught a break in the case when they found a body of a woman who was in her early 20s, and she wasn't really badly burned, but she was starting to seriously decompose because it had been 3 days since she was killed. And this woman was a young woman by the name of Hlaelemediapresentations. And it turns out that Hlaelemediapresentations disappeared from her home when she left with the man who came to recruit her for a job, and her remains were identified by her mother. Hlaelemediapresentations' sister said that she got very suspicious of the guy when he came to say that he had a job for Hlaelemediapresentations. As a matter of fact, she looked at the clothes that this guy was wearing, and he didn't really look like someone who came from town working in a hotel with a mission to recruit young people from Phoenix so that he can get some jobs for them. So he looked very suspicious. His clothes didn't look the part. They were all, cheap looking and raggedy. And she started to question this whole thing. But Hlaelemediapresentations was so excited about, getting a job that none of them paid much attention to it. And when she left with this guy, they had no idea that this would be the last time any of them would ever see her alive again. So on the 12th of July in 1997, another body of a woman had been found, and it made it the 11th body of the case. But this became a bit of a turning point for the investigation because the crime scene hadn't been tampered with and the woman's body was not even burned, because only the detectives were the ones who discovered this body. So it gave them a chance to really try to look and see if they can find something that could give them a lead to identifying who this guy is. And as more evidence kept on being gathered from this new crime scene, Dr. Mickey Pistorius got to work on completing the profile of the Phoenix Strangler, and she came to the conclusion that the police are looking for a man between the ages of 20 and 30, and this guy had at least a high school level of education, and he was very smart, intelligent, and charming, but he had the mentality of a psychopath and a hatred for women.
Although they're unconscious, in other words, they cannot talk, they cannot resist, it's not necessary to bind them up at all. Right, there was no resistance. So that was the fantasy element. The fact that he tied their hands, it's a do not touch me. So that's avoiding intimacy. The fact that he put the ball in the mouth is don't speak. So she becomes an object. He was fearful of women talking, of their mysticism, of touching, of being intimate. And that immediately put me into his mind.
And even though at this point over 11 bodies had been found, police were still concerned that there could be a lot more bodies out there. So what they did was they sent out teams with cadaver dogs that were trained to find the smell of a decomposing body. And they were actually right to do this because 4 more bodies ended up being found, taking the death toll to 15 women that had been killed by the Phoenix Strangler. After finding these 4 new bodies, they decided to study the state of decomposition to try to see how long it had been since they were killed. And they found out that these 4 women had been killed all within a day. So this guy was seriously busy. He killed 4 women just within a day. And even though the investigation of the 15 women who were killed was still going on, another 3 bodies of women were found, taking the death toll of the Phoenix Strangler to 18 bodies in total. Damn. And the police felt the pressure because this guy was busy. He kept on dropping women left, right, and center like they were flies. So they really had to do something quick so they can catch this guy. And the fact that the police hadn't really caught up to him yet, even though he had already killed 18 women, he started getting a little bit cocky. He started getting a little bit confidence that, okay, I'm killing all these women. I've been dropping like a lot of bodies lately, but these guys are not catching up to me. So he got cocky in a way that he started getting careless. With his confidence came a lot of carelessness. And this would soon prove to be his downfall. Because on one of the crime scenes, as the police were investigating, they found something that could seriously help them get a bit closer to finding out who this guy is. They found a used cigarette butt. And you know what that means? It means DNA. But don't celebrate just yet, because on the 5th of August in 1997, the Phoenix Strangler took his 19th and final victim. And when they got to the crime scene of this 19th victim and started analyzing it, they found 2 used condoms that were containing semen that seemed to have belonged to the Phoenix Strangler. And this got even Dr. Pistorius to comment that when serial killers start to feel like they are unstoppable, when they start piling up more bodies, they get arrogant and they make mistakes. So much so that they become forgetful and they don't really clear up their crime scenes. And this ends up being how a lot of them get caught. And this was very, evident. We could see that it was true because now 2 condoms containing semen had been found. Within just 48 hours of examining the DNA that had been collected so far, the police managed to come up with the DNA profile of the Phoenix Strangler. But remember, this is just a DNA profile. And unlike a fingerprints profile, this, DNA cannot really identify a person, like show who the person is. So police had to take the DNA profile and try to compare it against all the other ones they had in their records to see if maybe this is someone who had committed a crime before. So they took their old DNA profile records and wanted to compare them with this current one that they have now so they can see if they could find a match. So yeah, it's good news that they had some DNA to work with, but they still had some work to do. And it turns out that they once made a previous arrest from a previous case, and it was a sexual assault case. And in that case, they took the blood sample of the man who was accused of raping that particular woman, and they decided to take the blood sample and see if it could also provide them the same DNA that came from the cigarette butt as well as from the 2 used condoms. So now the police actually found that the blood sample from the previous case of sexual assault they covered matched the DNA that they found to have belonged to the Phoenix Strangler. And you know what this means? This means that they can now finally put a face to the name of the Phoenix Strangler. So when all pieces of evidence were put together, they gave the name of one particular man. And this man's name was Sipho Twala. So within just days of finding out that this man named Sipho Twala was the Phoenix Strangler, the police managed to track him down and find out where he lived. And they found out that he lived in a squatter camp overlooking the cane fields called Bestes. This squatter camp was called Bestes in Phoenix. So now they had that guy, they know where he was, and it was time to go and get him. But they couldn't just rush in to go and arrest this guy. They had to be smart about this because the place where Sipho lived in, it was known to be very lawless, and the people in that place really didn't like the police very much. So they thought that if they went in broad daylight to go arrest this guy, the people of that place could have, maybe stood in their way and tried to protect Sipho, and then he could have gotten away. So they had to be smart about this, and they decided to go in the late hours of the night with a lot of backup so they can arrest Sipho while everyone, including himself, were sleeping. And when they got to his home, they found a lot of evidence that proved to them that this guy really was the Phoenix Strangler. They found a lot of women's clothes, underwear, undergarments, and even Dr. Pistorius commented that she was also convinced just by looking at this guy with the cold look in his eyes that this guy really was the Phoenix Strangler and that the police had found exactly who they were looking for. And during his interrogation, Sipho Thwala actually admitted to killing all 19 women without not much of any resistance. And it's really weird when I think about it, because in a lot of serial killer cases that I know, or the ones that I did in the past, the killers don't always admit to killing all the victims of the case. They only admit to a certain number. I don't know why. Maybe they think that it would get them like a reduced sentence or something. I don't know. But he was different. He admitted to killing all 19 women. Said, yeah, it was me. I'm the guy you're looking for, without any much of resistance at all. Dr. Pistorius, being the curious cat that she was, or is, wanted to know exactly why this guy did what she did. She wanted to know what drove him to killing so many women. So she asked him exactly what the reason was. And he just looked at her and told her that he had a girlfriend. And Sipho's girlfriend once told him that she aborted his baby. And this brought him so much pain that he got to see women in a totally different way. And he started to hate women wherever he saw them. And so he decided to start going on a rampage and killing every woman he could get his hands on. Yeah, and if you remember correctly from the profile that Dr. Pistorius did about this guy when they were trying to identify him, she did mention that he had a mentality of a psychopath and a very deep hatred for women. I guess she was right on the money, because he just admitted that he was killing women because his girlfriend had aborted his baby. So she was definitely right about the hatred part. Out of the 19 bodies that were found, 8 of the victims were identified and the rest were just buried in unmarked graves and remain unidentified until today. And then on the 31st of March in 1999, Sipho Thwala was convicted of 16 counts of murder, 3 counts of rape, 7 counts of indecent assault, 1 count of attempted murder, and he was sentenced to 506 years in prison at the CMEX Penitentiary in Pretoria. So he is never getting out of prison because he's still there to this day. Doesn't it freak you out to know that someone like this is actually out there? Like someone who did something like this is just sitting in a prison cell somewhere as you are watching this video about him. It kind of gives me the chills, man. Like, it's freaky to think about, you know? But yeah, he will never get out of prison. He will be there until he dies, because there is no way he can serve that full sentence of 506 goddamn years. But yeah, guys, that was the long and terrifying case of the Phoenix Strangler, aka Sipho Thwala. Yikes, this guy had some issues. I mean, I get that he was hurt by his girlfriend, but that doesn't give him the right to do what he did. No one has the right to do what he did, no matter the circumstance that led him to doing that. I mean, damn, that was messed up. But if you made it to the end of the case, thank you guys so much. Thank you. I really appreciate the support that you've been showing my channel so far. And again, if you are new here, please subscribe to the channel and also follow me on my other socials so you always know when a new episode is ready and waiting just for you, because I do this only for you, and that's a fact. But for now, I'll have to sign out, and I will see you again next time when I upload a new episode. Take care of yourself, and cheers.